Hello everybody, and thank you for joining me. This is Sierra from Sierra T Designs, and today I have this super vibrant 5x7 card to share with you. So let's jump right in. I'm going to use a piece of distress watercolor cardstock, and this is just one of the 8x10 pieces cut in half that I had sitting there. And I'm going to white heat emboss a big floral on it. Now I have a bin of things that sit beside me that I haven't used, and I had two Simon stamp sets that I'm going to use for this because I'm really trying hard to use everything that I purchased. So everything that's brand new goes in this little bin that sits beside me, and then when I'm struggling a little for an idea, I'll go through that bin and pick out things that I think would be a lot of fun to work with. So the two stamps that I'm going to use this are brand new to me. They're not new for Simon, but they're newer for me. And the one I'm using right here is the Beautiful. It's the Simon Says Stamp Beautiful Bouquet. And it's this huge floral. And if you guys have been with me for a hot minute, you know how much I love floral images. So I'm going to white heat emboss this so that it's easy to add color to. And then for the greeting is going to be another stamp set that's new to me. So we'll get there in a little bit here. So I chose to white heat emboss this simply because I wanted embossing because it would hold the color specifically, and I went white. You could have gone clear for this if you didn't want to use white. I don't really think that it would have mattered either direction because the paper's white, so you would have ended up with white lines regardless. I just used white because I have more of that embossing powder. I think that's why I ended up kind of leaning that direction. And I'm going to use some green painter's tape just to hold down my panel. I was asked recently that if I had added moisture to both sides of a piece of cardstock, if it would have kept it from curling. And maybe. I've never tried that, so definitely try that if you think that that would work. But I find the best way to keep your cardstock flat when adding a lot of moisture is actually doing what I'm doing here and adhering it to a hardboard. Also using a piece of cardstock that can take a lot of water because that is also an issue. So a heavyweight watercolor cardstock will also help. So I have the stamp set there kind of to my right, just so I can see where the leaves are, where the flowers are, where different flowers are. So that kind of tells me where to put my paints. In this case, they're Nouveau Shimmer powders. After I used them a couple of weeks ago in that other video, I just was itching to play with them some more. So I brought them out again for this, and it's like kind of a paint by numbers-esque thing because I'm just kind of adding a little bit of powder in each floral area and like green for the leaves. So the exact colors I use are Violet Brocade, Cherry Bomb, Solar Flare, Blue Blitz, Green Parade, and Atlantis Burst. And I will have all of the colors linked and listed down below if you're interested in anything. And here you can see like I'm barely tapping the color pigment on there. These are super, super vibrant. And honestly, I probably have too much pigment. You're going to see it as soon as we add a little bit of water that I probably put on too much, but it's hard for me not to be a bit heavy-handed. So I tried really hard to only use a little bit, but I probably used a bit too much. And then I am just kind of misting my cardstock. I do have a flowered sackcloth underneath just so that the water wouldn't go over my iPad. I even have it hanging over top of my iPad just so that it wouldn't end up there. And I brought in a paintbrush just to break up any of the area that the pigment did not get enough water to kind of burst. So that's why you see the paintbrush. Otherwise, we're not really going to do much except kind of break up those so that they don't fall off, because they will. If they don't burst into their color liquid form, they can just kind of clump up and fall off the project. So this is why I brought in the paintbrush, just to kind of move the color around in the areas that it didn't really break up properly. Otherwise, I don't really do anything. I have a piece of paper towel there, and I do blot up the areas that a lot of color is pooling, simply to get this to speed up a little bit. Otherwise, I try really hard not to manipulate the colors too much because I do want a very bold, vibrant color, and I don't want them to blend and make brown or like a muddy gray color. So then I brought in my heat tool. Again, this is just because I'm lazy and I don't want to sit here and wait for the image to dry on its own. You absolutely could set this aside, walk away, do something else for a while. I tend not to do that, so I didn't in this instance, but I just used my heat tool to kind of speed up the process. And then I'm going to pull off the tape, and you're going to see that my panel, though it got very wet, is flat. I mean, I think there's a little small amount of bowing, but otherwise this panel is pretty much flat, which is why the hardboard is important if you're concerned about your paper warping when adding a ton of moisture. So here you can see it's pretty much flat. And then I did bring in a baby wipe. I'm just wiping off any of the excess color that's sitting on top of the embossing powder because it is water soluble. It's easy to just buff it off of the embossing lines. Now, don't rub the painting, of course, because you will then lift the color from the areas you want the color in, but this just removes it from the embossing powder and lets that white shine through a little bit stronger, which I quite enjoy. So I am making a 5x7 card. So I do have pre-made bases. I bought them a long time ago. They're by Strathmore. So I'm going to use one of those bases. So I'm not going to create my own base for this, but you absolutely should and can. I tend to make my own bases. I find that easier. But a long time ago when I first started card making, I bought these 5x7 pre-made bases. So I'm trying now to use them all up slowly. So I am cutting this down to be slightly smaller. I think it's about 1/4 of an inch smaller than my 5x7 base. And I will also cut out a gold panel to go underneath it that is slightly smaller than that. So it's about 1/8 of an inch smaller than my base. And you can see I always kind of measure it here, and then I ended up trimming off a little bit more, but I didn't show you that. And then I'm going to stamp inside of the card base. So I have the same floral image and some Golden Glitz Delicata ink that I'm going to stamp down on the inside of the card base that I've just folded inside out. So I'm planning on doing a kind of introduction video here soon, where I'm going to sit down and I'm going to talk face to face with you guys so you can kind of meet me, and I'm going to introduce myself, and I'm going to talk a little bit about where I want my channel to go and what I'm kind of thinking for new content and that kind of thing. And if you guys have any questions for me, please leave them below this video. I would happily answer questions you have about me or about my life or about crafting or about whatever you want to ask me. I would more than happily answer them. So if you have any questions, please leave them below this video, and I'll jot them down, and then when I get time to sit down and do that intro to me video, then I will answer them. So I just thought that would be kind of fun way to kind of be a little more interactive. So I brought in the Simon Says Stamp etched butterfly die, and I cut it out of gold here. This is the panel that I'm going to adhere my colored panel on top. I guess it's the matte, because I wanted a gold center. So I also cut it out of some pearlescent vellum. This is the Lawn Fawn version, and I really wanted it to have a gold center. And you can see that I also have the gold version there as well. I adhere that one too, though I don't end up using it in this card design. I pondered it pretty seriously for a little bit, but I felt like it just was too much gold, and it ended up taking away from the image a bit more than I was interested in. So I adhere it here with the little vellum, the pearlescent vellum center, but I'm not going to actually use it on this project. I'm going to cut out a second butterfly from that vellum cardstock, the pearlescent one, and use that instead. And then here's the second Simon Says stamp set I'm going to bring out. This is the XL Birthday Greetings stamp set, and I'm going to gold heat emboss that on a heavyweight vellum. This is again just to tie in more of that gold because I quite enjoy it, but not have it be on top of everything, if that kind of makes sense. Like, I want everything to really have the background shine. That's its purpose. That's why it's so bold and vibrant. But everything that I'm kind of using on top of it is either, transparent or translucent, or it has very little blocking ability. So that's kind of why I chose a piece of vellum for this. I did ponder cutting it out of just a white cardstock and gold embossing on that instead, which you could do, but I just really didn't want to cover up much of the background. So I brought in a stitched rectangle die from my stash, and I cut it out just so that it would be kind of like a nice finished rectangle. And when I put it on top, it's kind of difficult to see, but you'll see in the end when I hold it up that it's really easy to read the sentiment. It's just that it's a little difficult to see it on camera, and sadly that's kind of applicable to a lot of the features of this specific card. It doesn't quite do it justice. I try to take decent pictures of what I create, but a lot of the time the shine and shimmer just doesn't quite come through. So that's on my list of things to get better at, but it's a very long list, so we'll have to see how that goes. But I just brought in my Nuvo Deluxe glue, and I'm going to adhere this down. This bottle's almost empty, that's why I keep bringing it back in. I'm trying to use up every last drop. I cut out the part of me bonking it against my glass mat to try to get more glue out. But it's kind of funny. And I did also use my Barely Art glue on any of the thin bits in this. So when I go to adhere down my sentiment, I'm going to use the Barely Art glue's very thin tip to kind of just write lines behind the happy birthday sentiment. And I did bring in my MISTI to make sure that everything adhered flat. I don't like bowing, and I do find that when you cut out of the center of the mat, sometimes an air pocket kind of gets stuck in there, and this helps stop that from happening. Otherwise, the center of my card kind of ends up bowing, and that's not something that I want. So I brought in that Barely Art glue and just put little lines behind the letters of my sentiment. And then I'm going to bring in an acrylic block to kind of just weigh that down. Again, this is just so that it adheres flat. You don't really need to. It adhered perfectly fine, but it's just kind of a thing that I end up doing all the time. And now I know that I generally do embellishments in threes. You guys know the whole like visual triangles and the law of threes and everything like that. But these butterflies are large, so if I had had smaller or different sized butterflies, I would have definitely done 3 and had them be different sizes, but I didn't have 3. I only had this one die that's this size, and I didn't really want to only have one. It wasn't quite show-stopping enough, so I brought in a second one. I think that it still looks really pretty. You'll have to let me know what you think, but I kind of like how this came together. But it's all the things that I love, right? The pearls and the shine and butterflies and vibrant colors and shimmers. Like it's just, and florals. Like it's everything that I love about a card right here. So I would love to hear what you guys think of this. I'm going to hold it up here so you can see it in all of its glory. I'd love if you'd consider leaving me a like, leaving me a comment, and consider subscribing. I do new videos every Monday and Thursday. And like I said, if you have a question for me that you'd like to me to answer about anything, just leave it in the comments below and I will add it to a list. And then when I sit down to do a face-to-face with you guys, I will go through and answer some of those questions. So thank you so much, guys, and I will see you again very soon. Bye-bye for now.